The Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord naturally knew why the crowd had come. He told them very calmly that this place was the previous cultivation training ground of the Great Emperor. The Great Emperor's relic was located here. The Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord naturally knew why the crowd had come. He told them very calmly that this place was the previous cultivation training ground of the Great Emperor. The Great Emperor's relic was located here. If that is so, can Palace Lord allow us from the outside world to also pay tribute to the splendor of the Great Emperor? May we also see the relic left behind by Ziwei the Great? Asked someone straight away. They were already here, so there was no need to beat around the bush. It was best to speak directly about their goal for coming here. The crowd nodded in agreement as they looked at the Palace Lord. From the look in their eyes, it was understood that they also had similar thoughts. You may do so, said Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord. He still agreed to their request very readily. This caused the various cultivators to feel somewhat strange. Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord was too easygoing. It was as though he would agree to anything they said. Aside from eliminating a top figure who came into conflict with them, Ziwei Imperial Palace had been very welcoming and did not turn them away. However, the place where the relic of Ziwei the Great resides has been passed down for generations. It is the holy land of our Ziwei segmentum. Even here, it is not a place that just anyone may enter. It will only open once after many years to allow the most outstanding figures in the segment to enter. The Palace Lord slowly continued. Also, because the place where Ziwei the Great's relic resides is ancient, it is somewhat unstable. Hence, in the Ziwei segmentum, top figures don't enter into that place. Now that the seal to the Ziwei segmentum has been opened, and we are connected to the outside world, I rule over the segment and uphold the will of Ziwei the Great. I will allow the divine light of Ziwei the Great to shine on even more cultivators than before. Hence, even though all of you are not members of the Ziwei segmentum, I can allow all of you to receive the same treatment as the cultivators here. When the crowd heard his words, they vaguely understood his meaning. It seemed that this Palace Lord was also calculative. He gave some leeway, but he similarly set down restrictions. He said it so that only their most prominent figures could enter, using the laws of the Ziwei segmentum to bind them. Whether or not any rules he mentioned were true was not important. The Ziwei segmentum was under his jurisdiction. He himself was the rule maker. Were rules themselves important? Palace Lord overall, what do you mean to say? Someone asked. Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord looked around at the crowd and said, since all of you have come, I will allow all the cultivators from the top forces to choose their finest renhuangs to enter the divine temple where Ziwei the Great previously cultivated. However, they must be cultivators with flawless great paths, and they cannot be peak renhuangs with 9th-tier cultivation. How about it? The Palace Lord asked as he looked at the crowd. He stood at the top of a flight of stairs. Divine light shone from his body. His star-like eyes still bore an indifferent look. His words had already prevented most of the cultivators here from venturing in, including the giant-level figures. They had been held at bay by the words of the Palace Lord. The other party had no intention of letting them inside. The other party also said that Ziwei the Great had previously cultivated in this divine temple. They had come from the shattered Ziwei realm. All of them wanted to seek out the secrets of Ziwei the Great. The giant-level figures similarly had such an intense desire to unravel this mystery. For them, such an opportunity was even more precious. However, Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord was wary of them and did not allow them to enter. In such a way, it was their turn to consider whether they wanted to accept his terms. Since the other party had given them leeway and allowed the top monstrous figures of the various forces to enter the Great Emperor's relic, would they concede to his restrictions? For a moment, the crowd seemed very quiet. None of them responded. They were also originally from various forces. They were not just a small group of people, so their opinions would differ. Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord saw that the crowd did not respond, so he asked, do you all have any opinions about this? We are all from the outside world. We also wish to pay tribute to the splendor of the Great Emperor recorded in the history books. Why must Palace Lord deny us such an opportunity and set restrictions on us? Someone asked. Clearly, they did not want to agree to the conditions set by the palace lord. Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord glanced at the person who had spoken. He then said, "Very well. Since you disagree with my suggestion, then what I mentioned before no longer concerns you. Sir, please leave." When the person heard the words of the palace lord, he narrowed his eyes. He was the first to object. There should be many people of the same opinion as him. However, before the others could agree with him, the palace lord immediately spoke and banished him. It was deterrence again. He knew that he had become an example for the others. The cultivators from the other forces revealed strange looks. Initially, some wished to speak. Yet, when they saw the dominant nature of Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord, they kept their mouths shut for now, and instead looked at the person who had spoken. The person who had spoken did not move. Hence, cultivators with flawless great paths stepped forward one by one. There were no peak figures with 9th-tier cultivation. "Go on," Emperor Nan said to Yi Futian and the rest. "Be careful," Xiao Dingtian cautioned Xiao Muyu. Immediately, Yi Futian's group stepped forward. Among their group, most of the cultivators were of the allowed level. There were many from Four Corner Village. Hence, this rule gave them a huge advantage. Of course, they still did not know what the situation in the relic was like. However, they did not need to worry about any schemes. After all, even the ruler of the Ziwei segmentum would not dare to offend all the forces from the outside world in one go. If he did so, he would probably bring about the destruction of the entire Ziwei segmentum. Since that was the case, the people who stepped forward were the finest renhuangs of the various forces. These renhuangs all stepping out at the same time was a majestic sight to behold. Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord glanced over the crowd of cultivators who had stepped forward. He then turned and said, "Follow me then. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." The group of people followed behind the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace and headed into the Grand Ancient Divine Temple. The group of people followed behind the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace and headed into the Grand Ancient Divine Temple. The top figures of the various forces waited where they were, watching the multitude of figures who walked forward into the Divine Temple. Many cultivators entered the Divine Temple. They came from various forces, and were not just the cultivators of the Divine Prefecture. Wanting to obtain a fateful encounter would most likely not be simple. Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord also intended to restrict them. He would certainly set up his own precautions. Having ruled the segment for countless years, Ziwei Imperial Palace probably did not want the teachings of Ziwei the Great to be obtained by outsiders. In a sense, Ziwei Imperial Palace was only displaying a dominant stance on the surface. In reality, they were taking a step back as well. After all, they were involved with too many forces at the moment. However, letting the cultivators from the outside explore first was also fine. In front of the majestic ancient divine temple, divine light rained down and enveloped the entire temple. The various cultivators had stern expressions as they followed the palace lord inside. Inside the divine temple, a starry world appeared before their eyes. It was as though there were many doors made from stars that led to different locations. "All of you may enter," Ziwei Imperial Palace Lord said as he pointed ahead. "Past these doors, you will enter the relic left behind by Ziwei the Great, and reach the place where he previously cultivated. This is the most sacred and restricted area of our Ziwei Imperial Palace. There will be people inside guarding the seals. After you enter, there will be people there to help you open the seals." "Yes, Palace Lord," replied the crowd as they nodded their heads. They then stepped forward and passed through the door, entering another space. Just as the Palace Lord had said, they seemed to have entered into a large hall. There was an astonishing matrix within the hall, and two cultivators with extremely frightening auras were guarding it. These two cultivators glanced at them, and immediately activated the Grand Matrix. Countless beams of divine light instantly flowed around them, as though the stars in the heavens were moving around them. Frightening light from the matrix lit up the entire hall, flowing endlessly. Yi Futian and the others looked down at their feet. In the next moment, beams of light flooded their bodies. In an instant, Everyone felt as though the world was spinning. They seemed to pass through countless halls and enter into a starry world. However, in the span of a thought, their figures came to a halt. Yet they knew that the matrix had already brought them to another place. What is this place? Wondered some of the cultivators. The cultivators glanced around at their surroundings. They were slightly astonished. They sensed that they were actually in space. Around them was a galaxy. Starlight flowed, and it was a majestic sight to behold. Yet they were standing on something solid. It was as though this was a starry divine temple without walls. There was a stairway that led up into the sky. Beyond the majestic galaxy, there was a blurry silhouette. It was like the scene they had witnessed in the galaxy in the segment. It was the silhouette of Ziwei the Great. Is this a starry divine temple? Someone mumbled. This miraculous place made them feel as though they were in a dream world. They sensed that the palace lord of the Ziwei Imperial Palace had not tricked them, and had indeed sent them to the place where Ziwei the Great previously cultivated. For a legendary existence like Ziwei the Great, only such a unique place was suitable for him to cultivate in. Instead of a large hall, he made the starry sky his own cultivation court. Buzz! The crowd advanced upward. Since they were already here, they would naturally explore the relic of Ziwei the Great. What had the great emperor left behind in this starry cultivation court? After Yi Futian sized up the majestic scene, he turned his gaze in one direction. When he saw a cultivator standing over there, a murderous intent flashed past in his eyes. In that direction, the other party seemed to have noticed Yi Futian's gaze. He also looked in Yi Futian's direction. Their eyes met, and immediately, their frightening gazes revealed murderous looks. Sealing divine light seemed to immediately shoot out of the other party's eyes and invade Yi Futian's mind. The divine light of the Great Path flowed over Yi Futian's body, blocking off the sealing power. Light shrouds of the Great Path expanded outwards from their bodies. A formless pressure of the Great Path appeared between the two of them. The cultivators around the two of them sensed something and looked in the direction of the other parties. The person that Yi Futian was staring at was none other than Ning Hua, the vice chief of the Donghua domain chief's manor. When the Four Corner Village cultivators and the Heavenly Mandate Academy saw this scene, they realized that Yi Futian most likely had a vendetta against this person. Otherwise, Yi Futian would not behave in such a manner. On the other hand, Ning Hua was surrounded by cultivators from the Donghua domain. They looked toward Yi Futian and were slightly shocked. From the looks of it, the current Yi Futian actually intended to kill Ning Hua. Moreover, the lineup around Yi Futian was sufficiently powerful to pull off this kill. Rumor has it that you made quite a name for yourself in the Shangqing domain. Is that the reason why you dare to be so presumptuous now? Ning Hua stared intently at Yi Futian. A hint of disdain could be found in his arrogant gaze. Ning Hua was an 8th-tier Runhuang with a flawless Great Path. He was the top monstrous figure in the Donghua domain. Aside from the giant figures, he was without equal. He was confident that very few cultivators below the giant figure level in the Divine Prefecture were on par with him. This trip to the original realm was a trial for Ning Hua. He might have a chance to spar with top figures from other parties while coming in contact with them. However, he had not expected that Yi Futian, who he formerly defeated, would actually intend to kill him now. If it weren't because Yi Futian was saved by someone, Ning Hua would have killed him back then. Yi Futian did not respond to the other party. His white robe fluttered as he cast a glance at the cultivators beside Ning Hua. Cultivators from the few top forces in the Donghua domain were present, including cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy and the Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow. Qin Qin communicated with Yi Futian through transmitted thought, saying, "Run Huang Yi, before coming here, Domain Chief has asked various forces to take care of Ning Hua, and we have agreed to it. If Ren Huangyi wants to attack Ning Hua, can you please do so on another occasion?" The cultivators of the Donghua domain came together. Since Domain Chief Ning Yuan was not personally here, cultivators from other forces were naturally responsible for taking care of Vice Chief Ning Hua. Otherwise, they would most likely have difficulty explaining themselves to Ning Yuan after they returned to their domain. Beside Ning Hua, Desolation from Desolate God Palace, Goddess Taihua, and the others also turned their gazes toward Yi Futian. Yi Futian knew that what Qin Qing said was true. If he were to attack, the cultivators of the Donghua domain wouldn't just sit back and watch. The top monstrous figure in the Donghua domain, Yi Futian said as he looked at Ning Hua and smiled. His smile bore an air of mockery. Ning Hua frowned and said, "Back when Zhong Chan was killed, you were fortunate to have survived. Who saved you?" He actually did not know back then that the Donghua domain still had such an incredible figure. Even his father did not know who the person was. After that, they speculated that the person who aided Yi Futian might be related to Emperor Shi. However, they had no evidence. Even the domain chief had to be polite to a powerful cultivator who had survived a divine tribulation. He could not just head over and interrogate Emperor Shi. "You'd better pray hard for your luck to keep you alive in the future," said Yi Futian as he swept a glance at Ning Hua. He then turned around and headed forward. Right now, the cultivators of various forces had already departed to explore the cultivation court of Ziwei the Great. Only their groups were wasting time. Yi Futian stepped into the sky, and his group also took to the skies at the same time. Ning Hua stared at his silhouette. Murderous intent flowed within his gaze. Chapter 2211. The Last Writing of the Great Emperor. Chapter 2211. The last writing of the great Emperor Yi Futian's group kept advancing upwards. They looked at the vast galaxy, and it felt as if they were in a dream. It wasn't easy to differentiate between the illusory world and the actual world. The cultivators who left before them seemed to have made their own discoveries. They began to disperse and head off in different directions. "It seems that there are ritual implements," said Do Zhao beside Yi Futian. Yi Futian naturally also saw this. There seemed to be ritual implements floating around among the stars in the vast world of the galaxy. They might be items that were previously used by Ziwei the Great. With Ziwei the Great's level of cultivation back then, any item that he used would contain a sliver of the will of the emperor, Gu Donglu added from the side. However, they continued upward without stopping. In the starry sky, they seemed to see a few floating star lights that were very far away. As they gradually approached these star lights, the star lights became clearer. "They are writings," someone said. Many people discovered the runes floating in space. They seemed to be writings. The runes were formed from starlight. They floated endlessly within the galaxy, eternal and indestructible. In the end, many people made out the line of writing that was casually floating around in the galaxy. Their hearts trembled intensely. Was this the writing of the great emperor? A line of writing that he casually wrote was forever etched in the starry world. "Is this the last writing of the great emperor?" said someone who made out the line of writing with a trembling heart. These seemed to be the final words of the great emperor. In the end, Yi Futian's group also made out the line of writing floating in the sky. They understood its contents. Each character seemed to be independently floating there. However, the characters could also be read together and formed a complete paragraph. "In this war of the heavenly path, all life will face calamity. I will be heading off to join the battle. I do not know when I will return. I will seal off the Ziwei segmentum myself. Even if I perish, my will remain to protect Ziwei from being destroyed." This line of runes floated high in the sky. They were astonishing. It was as though they were left behind before Ziwei the Great went off to meet his end. What sort of battle was the war of the heavenly path? Ziwei the Great left to join the battle. Who was he up against? Against the heavens? Against the various gods? What secrets were there about the collapse of the heavenly path? What exactly was the event? Was it a battle between gods? Why did it cause the fall of the gods? What exactly happened in the ancient age? Ever since that war, the heavenly path collapsed and the age of the gods was a thing of the past. Yi Futian recalled Xinjia the great emperor. There was originally no path in the world, and he did not believe in the heavenly path. Xinjia the great emperor was physically invincible, but he still died in the war. Ziwei the Great ruled the Ziwei segmentum. He was the legendary Ziwei the Great. However, before he went to war, he foresaw that he might perish. What sort of intense battle did they join? It was as though this part of history was sealed away. It might be that only a few remaining gods in the world knew the truth of the divine war in the past. However, Ziwei the Great still left behind his will and protected the Ziwei segmentum from being destroyed during the calamity. This kind of courage and strength was indeed amazing. He was worthy of being a figure who shook the world. The cultivators who came today were all from extraordinary backgrounds. They came from various top forces and knew about these things to a certain extent. It was precisely that they knew some things that they were even more curious. They were curious about the era, how the battle was like, what had happened, how it had become the twilight of the gods, and how it caused the collapse of the heavenly path. They wished that they could travel back through time and space and return to that era to witness the ancient war of the gods. It was an unprecedented battle that would have no equal after. In the present day, it was impossible to imagine what such a battle would be like. Right then, Futian's group saw many cultivators rushing towards the direction of the runes. They could not help but reveal strange expressions. What were the cultivators doing? "There is a brush over there," said Chen-Yi as frightening divine light shot out from his eyes. He saw a brush floating in the space where the runes were. It emanated faint starlight. Back then, Ziwei the Great had etched these runes into the fabric of space. If he had indeed used this brush to do so, that meant that the brush was extraordinary. The brush that the great emperor used to write, even if it was an ordinary item, would become extraordinary. Moreover, nothing that the great emperor ever used was ordinary. This might be a divine brush. The cultivators headed up into the sky. Although they could clearly see the runes, the actual distance between them was still very far. The runes were extremely high up in the space. "Let's also go take a look," said someone beside Futian. Their group rose into the sky and followed the ancient starry path upwards. After some time, they discovered that some cultivators had already arrived, and a large battle had actually erupted immediately. They seemed to be fighting over the brush. As expected of a divine item left behind by the great emperor, it caused a battle to erupt instantly over it. "Do you want to go over?" Fang Huan asked Futian. Among their group, Futian had become the core. "No," Futian replied when he saw what was going on over there. "I sense that things aren't as simple as they appear." Futian's group traveled along the ancient starry road upwards. In the endless starry world, starlight rained down from above. The crowd gradually sensed a solemn will. It was as though they could sense a heavenly might by just standing there. They could vaguely make out that this place was indeed the previous cultivation court of Ziwei the Great. Futian's group traveled along the ancient starry road upwards. In the endless starry world, starlight rained down from above. The crowd gradually sensed a solemn will. It was as though they could sense a heavenly might by just standing there. They could vaguely make out that this place was indeed the previous cultivation court of Ziwei the Great. At the end of the starry space, the illusory silhouette formed from gathered starlight gradually became clearer. It was actually the illusory figure of Ziwei the Great. This silhouette carried the entire starry world on his back and held a heavenly scroll in his hand. This heavenly scroll emanated brilliant starlight that shot out in different directions. In the direction where the starlight radiated out towards, the crowd vaguely saw many places where the starlight gathered. There seemed to be uniquely shaped nebulae there. It also seemed like galaxies existed there. However, they were not real, instead formed from endless starlight gathering in one place. Right then, the silhouettes of cultivators also appeared before these nebulae. They seemed to have discovered something. "Let's go take a look," Futian said. His group immediately headed over towards a sword-shaped nebula. The gathered starlight formed a sword that floated in the starry sky. Many cultivators were standing before this nebula. When Futian's group arrived, they sensed that there seemed to be a sword within the nebula. They did not know whether or not there actually was a sword. However, no one entered into the nebula to retrieve it. It was because someone had already tried to do so before Futian's group arrived. "It is a sword will," said Wuxia beside Futian. From the nebula, he actually sensed the existence of a sword will. Could it be that Ziwei the Great had previously cultivated here? Had the sword will he unleashed formed a sword-shaped nebula? This nebula was very expansive, enveloping hundreds and thousands of miles of space. It was like a sword of stars hanging in the starry sky. Endless starlight flowed within it. Even the flowing starlight contained sword will within it. Did Ziwei the Great also practice swordsmanship? Someone asked in a low voice. Yi Futian gazed at the nebula and saw the flowing sword will. His gaze seemed to become extremely bright. It was as though everything in the world changed within his pupils. In his eyes there was no galaxy, only countless swords. He saw countless swords flowing in the starry sky. They were eternal and indestructible, forming a majestic and beautiful nebula. The river of swords was reflected in his eyes. It was as though they had entered into his eye sorcery zone, and into his mind. Yi Futian felt as though the entire world was changing. As he stood there, within the galaxy of swordsmanship, in an instant, terrifying sword will descended. Endless sword light in the galaxy rained down on him. He could not evade them at all. It was as though they flooded space and time. Astonishing light burst forth from his pupils, followed by the aura of the great path. Yet the river of swords descended, and immediately buried his figure. Rumble! Yi Futian felt a sharp pain in his eyes. Blood actually seeped out from them. He stumbled backward a few steps. He lowered his head and closed his eyes, no longer looking forwards. This scene surprised the people beside Yi Futian. They frantically looked at him. What happened? Could it be that he saw something again? Many people from other forces were also looking at Yi Futian. Among their own members, someone had experienced something similar to Yi Futian just now. An indifferent voice said, "This might be the remnant sword will of the great emperor. One should not simply try to comprehend it." Yi Futian opened his eyes, and did not look at it the same way as before. He took a deep breath and calmed his aura. His heart was still shaking. Back then, he had a similar experience when he first saw the corpse of Xinjia the great emperor. This time, he had been careless and looked directly with his eyes. His consciousness had entered into the sword will, and that resulted in him being attacked. If that was the case, were the other nebulae also remnants of the will of Ziwei the Great? Yi Futian turned around and looked far into the distance in other directions. If it was as he speculated, this place was a cultivation holy land. There was law power left behind by Ziwei the Great here. However, Yi Futian was not very interested in this. After all, he had already cultivated using many different methods, and was not lacking in law powers. The body of Wei that he forged from observing the body of Xinjia the great emperor was already mighty. In the heavens above, what was the heavenly scroll that Ziwei the Great held in his hand? Was the remnant will of Ziwei the Great truly contained within this illusory figure of him? At that moment, Yi Futian felt a powerful sword will suddenly appear beside him. He turned and glanced to the side. He saw Yi Wuchen shining from head to toe. Sword will flowed over him. There was even the faint sensation of an extremely divine will of swordsmanship coming from him. His glabella seemed to shine with brilliant sword light. The light immediately pierced towards the river of swords ahead. Clearly, Yi Wuchen's consciousness had also entered into the sword will. He was a swordsman, so he naturally would be able to sense it. After a short while, Yi Wuchen's figure was sent flying backward violently. A formless storm of sword chi swept up around his body. A streak of blood appeared on his forehead. As he steadied himself, he opened his eyes. His gaze was not as sharp as before. He actually seemed decadent. The aura on his body was also fluctuating. Yi Futian took out a bottle of pills and passed it over to Yi Wuchen. Yi Wuchen immediately took the bottle, poured out a pill, and swallowed it. A vibrant life force immediately enveloped his body. He still held onto the bottle of pills, ready to consume them at any moment if needed. "What type of sword will did you detect just now?" Yi Wuchen asked Yi Futian. "See for yourself," answered Yi Futian. Then, a divine light burrowed into Yi Wuchen's mind through his glabella. After a short while, Yi Wuchen looked up at Yi Futian. He was somewhat surprised as he said, "The swordsmanship contained inside this sword will is complicated. We have both sensed different things." "Huh," uttered Yi Futian as he revealed a strange expression. They had both sensed different things. "Let's try again," Yi Futian told Yi Wuchen. "All right," replied Yi Wuchen as he nodded his head. The two of them continued to gaze at the river of swords ahead. Yi Futian's eyes once again became very frightening. Could it be that he had underestimated this river of swords before this? He peered inside once again. In the galaxy, billions of divine swords were flowing. However, this time, he expanded his will radiating it out towards the entire galaxy. He wanted to get a clearer look. He did not try to sense the flow of the sword will anymore. Gradually, his brilliant eyes closed, and he stopped using his eyes to see, instead feeling with his heart. His consciousness seemed to be standing in an endless starry sky. He was overlooking the galaxy. At that moment, he no longer saw countless swords flowing. He only saw one sword. It was a starry divine sword that stretched across the starry world. This was completely different from what he had sensed just now. Chapter 22:13. Swallowing the Nebula. Chapter 22:13. Swallowing the nebula. Futian felt like he could see a divine sword of stars stabbing towards him. The will of the great path in him exploded, enveloping his body in sparkles. It was like he had the body of a god. Boom! He felt the divine sword come straight for him. So he instinctively started to retreat, and his consciousness shook violently. At that moment, Futian broke out from that mode. He took a deep breath, and looked out at the calm galaxy of stars in front of him. The feeling he had before disappeared. But he knew that this nebula wasn't ordinary, and it carried an astonishing amount of swordsmanship within itself. After a few moments, something similar seemed to have happened to Wuxian. He looked towards Futian only to hear Futian say, "I'll pass it on to you." All right. Wuxian ceased all formalities. He knew that Futian wanted to help him to comprehend this nebula. Futian's cultivation methods were already very powerful after all, so even with the addition of Ziwei the Great's sword technique, it might not help him grow very much stronger. Futian used his divine consciousness to pass everything he had comprehended to Wuxian. After that, they continued to digest this, and they understood more and more about swordsmanship. Each time they understood more, they felt different. They were not alone. The other cultivators also experienced the same thing. Yaya, swordmaster of Lihen, and the rest were all cultivators of swordsmanship, and they were all comprehending this. Besides passing on his enlightenment to Wuxian, Futian also passed it to the rest to see if they could reap anything from this nebula. The cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy weren't in any hurry either, and they just waited quietly. This nebula seemed to contain the will that Ziwei the Great had back then while cultivating. So Futian and the rest were trying to comprehend it, and see if they could gain any enlightenment. Do Zhao looked towards the rest of the starry dimension. Several people were cultivating before the nebula in different areas. It was as if the nebula in this starry cultivation area might be hiding pockets of Ziwei the Great's cultivation. Why don't we head to other areas to have a look first? Do Zhao broke his silence. You can do that, but try not to walk too far away. Otherwise, if anything happens, we won't be able to reach you in time, replied Feng Gai. Do Zhao nodded. Got it. With that, the group began to split up and walk towards other areas. But Feng Gai and Blind Tai remained by Futian's side. Feng Gai murmured to Feng Huan, "Why don't you go explore the areas as well?" "Sure." Feng Huan nodded and walked away. Eventually, this area was only left with the few of them. Futian and the rest were still deep in cultivation, and time continued to tick by slowly. Without them realizing it, they had already been in this state of comprehension for several days. But because they were deep in their cultivation, they didn't feel it at all. A few days felt like the blink of an eye to people at their level of cultivation. One simple session of comprehension could take several days, or it could even take several months. As he stood in front of the nebula, Futian opened his eyes and looked at the nebula before him. But when he looked at them now, they didn't look like a nebula anymore. He could now see several different sword truths, and this interstellar cloud looked like it had become countless outlines of swords that moved before his eyes. Of course, when he looked at the nebula, an astonishing aura burst forth from his body. His great path was roaring, and his eyes seemed to look like those of the gods. His eyes were filled with an aggressive will to fend off that powerful sword will. Even though he was standing there, in reality, he felt like he was standing within the nebula. The sword will surged towards him and drowned him. It was as if he was comprehending it all by himself. But Futian and his companions weren't the only ones comprehending things now. There were other cultivators outside the nebula who were doing the same thing. In fact, while trying to comprehend it, they were also trying to enter it. Woong! Yi Futian opened his eyes again. He looked at Yi Wuchen and the rest next to him to see that they were still cultivating and comprehending. After a long time, Yi Wuchen opened his eyes and looked towards Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded at him slightly. Their eyes met, and they understood what each other was thinking about. I'll try. After Yi Wuchen finished speaking, his body whooshed by as he went forward to approach the River of Swords. He walked right to the edge of the nebula. Then an incredible and terrifying great path aura descended. At that moment a gargantuan illusion appeared. It was an illusion of Yi Wuchen. This illusion was extremely sharp and exuded an impossibly powerful sword will. After that, it headed towards that immense and borderless nebula. Yi Wuchen's consciousness seemed to have transformed into a giant that entered into the nebula. Is that how you do it? When the others saw this scene, they looked surprised. They watched as Yi Wuchen's illusion went into the nebula. Then countless amounts of sword will appeared, flowing with the sword will within the nebula. That's really ambitious. The pupils of everyone else watching narrowed slightly, but most of them were waiting to see what would happen next. Before this, someone else had also tried to do something similar to what Yi Wuchen was doing. He had expanded his divine consciousness to cover the vast space, so as to envelope the entire nebula to comprehend the sword will within it. It was a very bold move, but the consequences were a tragedy. Yi Wuchen's body shuddered violently, and an enormous sword light exploded from his body. At that moment, the sword will that flowed around his body seemed to have become a river of swords. At the same time, the nebula started to shift and actually turned into a galaxy as it started to engulf Yi Wuchen's body. The glow wrapped itself around Yi Wuchen in an instant, but it did not swallow him up. On the contrary, the immense amount of light went straight into his body. The divine light from Yi Wuchen burst forth into the distance, lighting up the entire starry dimension as a powerful sword will blasted from within him. This caused everyone's heart to pound wildly as they stared fixedly at his body. Had he really swallowed the nebula? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. A truly frightening and miraculous thing happened to Yi Wuchen. After he had swallowed the entire river of swords, his body emanated an incredible amount of sword will. Beams of light shone into the vast universe, and his entire body glowed brilliantly, as if he was in a dreamlike domain of swordsmanship. A truly frightening and miraculous thing happened to Yi Wuchen. After he had swallowed the entire river of swords, his body emanated an incredible amount of sword will. Beams of light shone into the vast universe, and his entire body glowed brilliantly, as if he was in a dreamlike domain of swordsmanship. He shut his eyes tightly, and wisps of sword will continued to flow through his body. The piercing sounds of a sword's blade could be heard coming from within his body, as if he was purifying and training it. He actually managed to swallow it successfully. Everyone's eyes were on Yi Wuchen. When they saw that his body had not been destroyed, they knew that he would probably succeed in swallowing the entire nebula, inheriting the sword will the nebula contained. This nebula was very likely to have been left behind from Ziwei the Great's period of cultivation. By swallowing it, Yi Wuchen could reap really tremendous rewards. Woong! An unbelievable amount of sword will exploded, causing the clothes of many to move and flap from the sheer force of the explosion. The illusion of a divine sword appeared on Yi Futian's body, and it looked like the divine sword that they had seen within the nebula. This divine sword wasn't an actual physical sword but an illusion, so it flickered from time to time. But it exuded a tremendous amount of sword will, and seemed to be formed by a terrifying sword chi. It seeped bit by bit into Yi Wuchen's body, resonating with the swordsmanship within him, and merging with his body. Boom! Just then, an extremely powerful sword cultivator appeared to walk in the emptiness. This sword cultivator was a powerful level 7 Renhuang, and his eyes possessed tremendous sword might. He descended and landed above Yi Wuchen. An incredible amount of sword will flowed over his body. He pointed at Yi Wuchen. He launched an attack on Yi Wuchen without holding back at all. 9 divine swords came down from the void. Blind Tai and the rest wanted to help, and Yi Futian frowned as well. But he didn't go forward to help and even stopped Blind Tai, Feng Gai, and the rest from going forward. They watched as the terrifying divine swords came down in an instant, carrying an equally terrifying mightiness, as they made their way towards Yi Wuchen to kill him. But a shocking amount of sword chi burst out from Yi Wuchen's body. His own body did not release this, but it came from the incredible sword hidden within the giant sword that he had swallowed. This shattered the sword will that came towards him. That sword will is really powerful. Everyone watching felt their hearts tremble and palpitate. Yi Wuchen's level of cultivation was way too low, so there was no way he could have released such a shocking amount of sword might. But the sword will he had swallowed turned out to be powerful enough to defend him against that attack. This made the expression of the sword cultivator from the void turn nasty, as if he could only watch as Yi Wuchen swallow up all of that energy and inherit the sword might hidden within the nebula. He doesn't have the right to control and swallow this sword cloud and inherit the energy within it all. A voice suddenly spoke up. The one who spoke was a middle-aged man in a black robe, who carried an extremely wide and large sword. His jet black hair flew wildly in the space, and his eyes were deep and equally black. He looked down at where Yi Wuchen was with folded arms. Anyone in this place was extraordinary. They were perfect cultivators of the great path, from top-tier factions of power. This man was no different. He did not come from the divine prefecture, but he was a powerful sword cultivator from the dark world. He was practically invincible now, and was a level 8 cultivator in swordsmanship. He was only one level away from the peak of his abilities. Over the past number of days, he had been trying to comprehend, and trying to think of a way to obtain the power of this nebula. He had tried several different methods, but he never thought that the person who would eventually swallow the nebula would turn out to be a mid-level Renhuang sword cultivator. Yi Wuchen was considered one of the weaker sword cultivators among the people gathered here. Most of the other cultivators were stronger than him. If you have the right to, then why didn't you get any of it? Yi Futian looked at the other party and asked him. The sword cultivator in black glanced at Yi Futian. His jet black eyes contained a tinge of ruthlessness, and it made him seem very dangerous. So I'm going to kill him, and try again to see if I can get it. The sword cultivator in black unsheathed the sword he was carrying. It was a huge black sword that emanated a frightening aura of death around it. The moment he held the giant sword in his hand, a terrifying aura exploded from his body, and put pressure on the rest of the people around him. Be careful, said Feng Gai in a low voice. He could sense that this man was a very powerful threat. Of course, Yi Futian had felt that too. He shifted slightly to stand in front of Yi Wuchen, while Feng Gai remained by his side to protect both of them. There were many powerful cultivators here, and Yi Wuchen was still in the midst of cultivating and absorbing that powerful nebula. So he needed someone to protect him throughout the process. Blind Tai floated up, and the illusion of an ancient god appeared behind him. He reached a palm out, and a giant divine hammer appeared in his hand. He gripped it hard, and a great path divine light flowed out. It contained a shocking amount of power. The man in a black robe raised his palm, and a frightening dark typhoon instantly appeared. The typhoon wind seemed as sharp as swords as it tore through the space, and seemed terribly heavy. With a shift of his body and the raising of his hand, a terrifying dark sword chi appeared in the space instantly. When his sword came down, the frightening typhoon covered the entire place, while deep and terrifying dark cracks appeared in the space. The cracks kept moving forward, taking over the vast space and heading straight for where Yi Futian was. The crack in the middle, in particular, looked like a dark, venomous dragon as it carried sword light, and tore through everything it touched. At the same time, Blind Tai made a move too. A majestic divine light encompassed the vast void. He swung the divine hammer in his hand wildly and raised both arms. The clothing on his arms began to tear as his muscles began to swell, and he was full of an incomparably wild and explosive power. Boom! An ear-deafening blast was heard as the raised divine hammer slammed against the space, instantly forming a terrifying screen of light that could fight against all attacks. Those black cracks of sword were immediately blasted to the sides, causing several cracks in the screen of light, but failing to shatter it. Meanwhile, the divine hammer collided directly with the giant sword in the middle, and it seemed like the entire place was going to explode and shatter, as a terrifying storm surrounded them. Anyone who wasn't at least a high-level Renhuang quickly retreated. That terrifying storm could tear through space, causing scary beams of light to appear in the sky. Eventually, Fangai unleashed a light screen in front of him to protect his side from suffering any residual impact. Several powerful Renhuangs felt the urge to fight as well. Most of the people left were sword cultivators, and they unleashed a barely visible sword will, which filled the space with suffocating pressure, which made everyone feel very uncomfortable. The divine light around Yi Wuqian's body remained just as bright. As that intense sword continued to seep into his body, the sword light from his body became even more brilliant and glorious. His swordsmanship aura kept becoming stronger, and he looked like he might even break through to the next level. When he saw all this happening, Yi Futian looked around at the others around him and said, "Everyone has come here to cultivate. If you've missed the chance here, there are opportunities in many other places, and you can all head elsewhere to continue your comprehension. Since someone has already taken this nebula, then I hope all of you can leave him alone." But his words didn't seem to have affected the others very much. The sword will that the other cultivators unleashed only became stronger, and several parties were unleashing astonishing amounts of sword might from all directions. They were all raring for a fight as they put pressure on where Yi Futian was. It was as if they were all waiting for one person to start fighting before they would all join in. After all, Fangai was protecting them, so it wouldn't be easy to get past him either. When he saw that everyone around him wasn't convinced, Yi Futian took a step forward. The great path divine light in his body began to surge, and his body seemed to be roaring. His eyes suddenly gleamed coldly, as if an icy moon had appeared within his pupils. His body suddenly became impossibly cold, and his frosty voice said, "If all of you insist on trying, then I'm afraid some of you might have come here for nothing. Is that so?" A sharp voice rang out. Yi Futian looked up above to see a level 7 Renhuang from a top-tier faction of power in the divine prefecture wave his palm. Countless beams of gold light instantly burst from his body, and a horrifyingly sharp aura swept through the space as many reddish gold divine swords appeared around his body. These reddish gold divine swords were so many that they blotted out the sky, covering the entire space. All of them were pointed towards Yi Futian, and each sword was incredibly sharp, as if they could cut through anything in the world. "You want to try?" said Yi Futian as he looked at the other party. "I'm going to try." The moment the other party finished speaking, he stepped into the void. In that instant, the reddish gold divine light slashed right through the void, causing the brilliant gold sword light to hurtle downwards and cover the sky. At the same time, the innumerable number of divine swords came down. The sight was terrifying to behold. Woong! Everyone watched as Yi Futian didn't dodge the attack at all. Instead, he ran straight into that ultra-powerful array of reddish gold divine swords, as if he wasn't afraid of anything at all. The Renhuang who made the attack frowned. How was this man so audacious? Could anyone survive these divine swords? However, at the same time, Yi Futian's entire body glowed spectacularly in the midst of the divine swords, as an astonishing amount of divine light burst forth from within his body. He seemed to have transformed on the spot, and transformed into a divine sword that could reach the heavens. He was now a starry divine sword, and the divine light of the stars surrounded his body. He carried an impossibly sharp aura, and a power to tear through space. Kaboom! Everywhere that the starry divine sword went, the reddish gold divine swords broke and shattered. The starry divine sword was under an intensely aggressive attack as well, but it continued to slash through the reddish gold swords and head towards the other party. The eyes of the attacker exploded with an alarming divine light. A divine wheel of the great path appeared in the sky as one giant reddish gold divine sword tore through and clashed head-on with the starry divine sword that was coming its way. Chapter 22:15. Take it that we don't know each other. Chapter 22:15. Take it that we don't know each other. The entire place fell silent. All the Renhuangs were standing in different spots, but they were all staring intently at Yi Futian. None of the people here were simple or ordinary, but even so, Yi Futian remained as audacious as ever. Then again, it seemed like he did have the right to be. A level 6 perfect Great Path Renhuang had completely defeated an extremely powerful level 7 one. Everyone could feel that the sword cultivator's attack earlier had been really aggressive, and any other level 6 perfect Great Path Renhuang would probably have been killed by those divine swords. After all, the difference between each level was extremely great, especially since the sword cultivator was already a high-level Renhuang at level 7. But Yi Futian had become the attack itself, and ran right past the swords from the other party, forcing the other party to use his divine wheel of the Great Path to block the attack, which caused cracks to appear in his divine wheel. Besides Yi Futian, Blind Tai's fighting abilities were extremely powerful as well. He was now engaged in a huge battle with the level 8 cultivator in black from the Dark World, and their fight had gone deep into the galaxy, which was a terrifying sight to behold. There was also Fang Gai, who was protecting Yi Wuchen. This combination of people made for a seriously strong team. Just then, Yi Wuchen emanated countless beams of sword light from his body, which shot into the starry skies. An astonishing sword chi completely covered his body, as a galaxy of sword will entered his body. He broke through to the next level, and reached level 5 Renhuang. Woong! The aggressive sword light burst into the sky, and Yi Wuchen opened his eyes. His entire body was glowing like an actual sword of the Great Path. He looked around him. Yi Futian looked down towards Yi Wuchen to see Yi Wuchen looking at him too. He nodded slightly, and didn't say any words of thanks. Given their relationship, there was no need for all this formality. They didn't need to say anything for the other person to understand. He has already inherited the path, and it has been fully absorbed into his path, so it is really meaningless for all of you to continue fighting. Why waste time on this? Said Yi Futian in a loud voice. The other cultivators glanced at Yi Wuchen, then some immediately turned and left. It was true that this vast space was where Ziwei the Great had cultivated, but since Yi Wuchen had already swallowed the nebula, fully absorbed it, and broke through to the next level, there was no point in staying here. One after another, they left and gave up on continuing to fight. Even the sword cultivator, who had been forced to retreat after attacking Yi Futian earlier, had left. After the shocking sound of a collision was heard, Blind Tai was forced backward, while the other party had been sent flying to somewhere even higher. He threw a glance down at Blind Tai as his black robe flapped wildly, and his black hair danced madly. "If there's a chance, I'll fight you again," he declared loudly before turning to walk away. Blind Tai couldn't see him, but he knew that the other man had walked away. He kept away his aggressive aura and said, "That man is mighty." Yi Futian had come over as well. He knew how powerful Blind Tai was since he had been able to fight Muyin Lan. Since that man in black had fought Blind Tai without obviously losing, he was certainly a very powerful fighter himself. The Divine Prefecture itself is already huge, and there are more worlds than that. Half of the best cultivators have appeared here, so it's not surprising that such powerful characters are here too. There might even be some who are even more powerful around, replied Yi Futian. Blind Tai nodded. He understood that too. This place had gathered the top fighters of the entire world, not just the best of one domain. Yi Futian looked towards Yi Wuchen again and asked, "How are you feeling?" Yi Wuchen had swallowed the entire nebula, but Yi Futian didn't know how much he had gained out of doing that. The bit of sword will that Ziwei the Great left behind contains a sort of swordsmanship. Yi Wuchen looked at Yi Futian with a gleam in his eyes. He was rather excited inside as well. He had gained way more than a breakthrough in level this time. Yi Futian smiled and nodded. This had indeed been a wonderful opportunity. After all, not everyone had attained the powers of great emperors more than once like himself. The swordsmanship of the sword, will that had been left behind from Ziwei the Great's cultivation, was extremely valuable to a sword cultivator. "Come on, let's go to other places to have a look," said Yi Futian, and they all left the place. Since the nebula had already been swallowed up, this area no longer had anything of value, so nobody stuck around. They all continued walking around the galaxy to look for where the others had gone. Just then, they noticed that a fight had broken out in front. Yi Futian looked in the direction of the fight, and his brows immediately furrowed slightly. "Oh no! Blind Tai exclaimed before suddenly breaking out into a run at breakneck speed. The rest of them also quickly headed to that area. Futian flew through the sky and arrived at that area in just a few moments, while Blind Tai and Feng Gai had already gone over first. They immediately got into a fight and clashed fiercely with them, causing the entire galaxy to shake violently. Futian increased his speed and came to where Feng Huan and Zifeng were. The aura around Zifeng trembled violently and seemed to be injured, but her entire body was covered in divine fire, so that she could recover very quickly. Above him, Shi Kuei and Gu Huai were standing in different places, but they were both facing powerful opponents. But of course, the one who had the most powerful cultivators surrounding him was Chen Yi. Several cultivators were standing around him, and they all possessed a terrifying aura. Some of them were even level 8 cultivators. The way they stood in this huge space had formed a tight circle around Chen Yi, as if they were afraid that Chen Yi would escape again. Before this, Chen Yi had escaped, so they started attacking his companions to force him to return. When he saw this scene, Futian knew that Chen Yi must have been the one who got into real trouble. Otherwise, the majority of the cultivators wouldn't be surrounding him now. Take this. Futian walked over to Zifeng and passed her an elixir. Zifeng shook her head and said, "I don't need it." She was a divine phoenix, so her self-healing ability was powerful. But her nasty and icy gaze was staring straight at the cultivators before her now. It was as if she was furious with them. She was someone who was rarely bullied. Back at the Eastern Deity Island, she bullied others and never the other way round. It was true that none of these people were from ordinary backgrounds, but neither was she. Her father was Lord Phoenix, and he dominated that region with the supreme deity Donglai. Futian didn't try to persuade her further. He looked up at Chen Yi and asked, "What did he do?" "He snatched a treasure from the nebula," replied Zifeng. Furthermore, it was when the others had helped to open the way in. They were about to get to the treasure when he dashed in and grabbed it instead. Futian felt his heart twitch slightly. This fellow was a really vicious one. No wonder so many people had surrounded him. But he did an excellent job, Zifeng complimented him. The divine light in her eyes glinted as she stared at the others and said, "Also, he could have just run off with the treasure, but got implicated by us. These fellows actually turned around to attack us to force Chen Yi to come back." Futian looked at Zifeng in shock. This obstinate phoenix was also someone unafraid of trouble. Earlier on, Wuxian's situation wasn't so bad. Everyone was here to cultivate, and you owned whatever comprehension you gained from the cultivation. Most importantly, once he had swallowed the nebula, it belonged to him, and nobody else could take it away from him. But treasures were different. As long as you had your hands on it, you were constantly in danger. Once others found out you had a treasure, they would naturally want to snatch it from you. "If you hand it over now, we can let you off," one of the powerful cultivators surrounding Chen Yi spoke up. They didn't dare to let their guard down. Chen Yi had other treasures on him, and he moved at the speed of light. That was how Chen Yi managed to get that treasure earlier. They had opened up the way only to end up benefiting Chen Yi and allowing him to take the treasure away. There was no way they were letting this fellow off easily. The treasure was left behind in the galaxy, so it belongs to whoever manages to get their hands on it. Since all of you helped open the way, I can only thank everyone from the bottom of my heart. There are many other treasures in the galaxy too. You can look around. Several others have already made their way there. Why insist on targeting me?" responded Chen Yi with a smile. His body was bathing in divine light, as if he was ready to run any minute. He looked down and glanced over at Futian. He transmitted his voice over. "Are you going to help me or not?" Futian looked up at him. This fellow actually knew how to ask for help. "How do you expect me to help you in such a situation?" replied Futian via transmission. "I'll take care of the folks below. You can save yourself and run if you can. Just take it that we don't know each other." Chen Yi stared down at Futian in shock. He couldn't believe such a heartless person existed. Just take it that they didn't know each other. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2216, Mightiness. Chapter 2216. Mightiness. Seeing that Futian clearly didn't intend to fight at all, Chen Yi knew that he had been heartlessly abandoned. He couldn't help but curse Futian for being a disloyal friend, thinking it had all been a waste of his kindness before. It seemed like he had to rely on himself. Chen Yi looked around at the people surrounding him. All these powerful cultivators had sealed this entire area off, so if he wanted to escape, he would have to smash right through the great path energy they used to seal the area. That would be a bit too difficult to do. So none of you intend to do me this favor? Said Chen Yi as he looked around. None of them budged after hearing what Chen Yi said. They even looked at him rather mockingly. Was this guy still able to do anything about this situation? Since you're not going to do me any favors, then fine. I'll give you the treasure. The next thing Chen Yi said made everyone take a double take. They stared at him speechlessly, then watched as a treasure really appeared in Chen Yi's hand and glowed brilliantly. He flung it out from his hand, and it floated in the void. That was exactly the item he had snatched earlier. What the? Everyone was stunned for a moment, but it only lasted one moment. An explosive blast could be heard the next moment as several hands reached out to grab the item. Some of them immediately tore through the void. Each one accelerated to their maximum speed to be the fastest to get their hands on that treasure. They couldn't be bothered about Chen Yi anymore at this point. Several large palms were headed straight for the treasure, and the sounds of their palms crashing into one another were horrifying as a fight immediately broke out. Nobody was going to allow anybody else to get their hands on it. Woom! Just then, a beam of light suddenly shone and flashed right past everyone else. This beam of light was too quick, so all they saw was a flash of light that passed and disappeared immediately. But what also disappeared immediately after that was the treasure they were fighting for just a moment ago. Everyone looked up in shock to see the beam of light shoot out into the distance, cutting a line through the sky and leaving only a faint trail. I can't believe all of you didn't learn your lesson. A provoking voice came from afar. The cultivators felt like they had been played out, and their expressions were particularly nasty. Chen Yi had fooled so many high-level cultivators, and the worst part was that he had pulled the same trick on them twice. Once they started fighting among themselves, he had gone at top speed to dash in and run off with the treasure. They had made the same mistake twice, and this stemmed from their greed. After all, the moment Chen Yi flung the treasure out, the first thing they thought of was to hurry up and snatch it. If one didn't grab it, someone else would. Nobody would think of guarding Chen Yi since that meant that someone else would get their hands on the treasure instead. If someone else got the treasure, there was no point in holding Chen Yi captive anymore. Besides, all of this had happened too quickly. Chen Yi had very cleverly used this sort of logic to trick these people again and run off with the treasure yet again. Boom, boom, boom. An alarming aura began to explode from each person. Beams of divine light shot through the sky at an insane rate as they tore right through the galaxy. Each beam was headed for that first flash of light. It was obvious that many of them were incensed. It was no longer a simple matter of fighting for treasure now. They were now feeling challenged and insulted. Some of them knew that they couldn't catch up with Chen Yi, so they remained where they were without bothering to give chase. Instead, they looked down below them, and their gaze fell on Futian and his other companions. It was as if they were one team. This was exactly how they had forced Chen Yi to retrace his steps. Futian had a strange look on his face now. This fellow had actually just run off with the treasure. What a surprise. But did that idiot purposely say those provoking words as revenge on how Futian wanted to pretend not to know him? As expected, the cultivators around Futian had an unfriendly look in their eyes. Blind Tai, Fang Gai, and the rest were gathered together, and they looked back at the other cultivators warily. Everyone here are high-level people from various factions of power. Every feud is traced back to one person, just like how every debt belongs to a creditor. Since he's the one who snatched a treasure from all of you can go and snatch it back from him. We are not well acquainted with him, so I hope that everyone will not implicate the innocent, said Futian as he stretched his arms out in a shrug. But it was obvious that nobody was buying it. Several mighty shadows put pressure on them, as they trapped them within this space. Even though this was only one of the areas in the starry space where people had gathered, there were still a fair number of high-level cultivators. Some of them were also perfect Great Path high-level renhuangs. "If we take all of you down, he's going to come back for sure," said one of them. "If you still insist on implicating the innocent, then we're not going to sit by and do nothing," said Yi Futian in a cold and distant voice. He looked around at the cultivators around him. More than one person from each major faction of power had come, and while some were powerful, some not so. Besides those high-level renhuangs, there were also renhuangs of other levels. A terrifying aura descended as nobody cared about what Yi Futian said. In fact, some of them had already begun to make their attack. One of them raised his hand, and a storm of the Great Path immediately gathered above him, followed by the appearing of a storm pagoda. This storm pagoda was suspended in the skies and kept expanding until it covered the whole place. Frightening lightning bolts could be seen below the storm pagoda, and each part of the storm seemed to contain alarming levels of destructive power. Blind Tai flew up into the sky and took a step forward. The heavens and earth roared as his divine hammer appeared once more. An equally alarming powerful storm was born, and it weighed heavily on this vast space. Every cultivator standing in different positions started to launch their attacks. Shi Kuei, Gu Huai, and the rest also took a step forward to unleash their own frightening auras. Yi Futian glanced at all those renhuangs with an aloof look on his face. The power of the Great Path flowed through his body, and a ferocious booming resonated from within his body, echoing in this space, causing loud blasts to ring out loud. More frighteningly, his body seemed to give off a seemingly sacred sort of glow, which made him look extremely otherworldly. His eyes seemed to transform into demon eyes, and it was as if a heart was beating wildly within him, causing this demonic chi to fill the place. Dung, dung dung. Many eyes were staring at Yi Futian. They seemed to all have sensed the aura of a demon god. The aura that was emanating from Yi Futian's body shocked them somewhat. This was the aura of a level 6 renhuang. But even level 7 renhuangs felt threatened. Just his aura alone was already no weaker than powerful level 7 renhuangs like themselves. Also, there was an incredibly frightening force that gripped their hearts, causing their hearts to palpitate, as if they could hear the wild pounding of the heart within Yi Futian's body. "Be careful, there's the aura of the demon god," said one of them as he stared at Yi Futian. He could tell that Yi Futian must have had some incredible experiences. That's Yi Futian. He got to view the divine body of Xinjia the Great Emperor in Shangqing Domain, and it's said that he comprehended the extraordinary body of the Great Path. And now his physical body is invincible, spoke another man. Yi Futian was surprised that this other man knew who he was. It seemed like he was gaining a reputation out there now, so even cultivators from other domains knew of his existence. But these cultivators still looked like they were prepared for battle, as if this information only made them want to spar with Yi Futian even more than before. Woong! A demonic storm swept through space, and a gigantic illusion of a peacock appeared behind Yi Futian. When the peacock god spread its feathers, it was as if countless pairs of eyes had appeared, and each pair of eyes was shooting out a frightening demonic light. The next moment, he suddenly turned into a flash as he dashed towards one particular direction at breakneck speed. "Stop him!" Someone shouted loudly. A powerful level 7 renhuang immediately took a step out, and the divine might of the Great Path came crashing down. A giant appeared in front of Yi Futian. It was glowing gold all over, as if it was wearing golden armor. When it saw that Yi Futian was coming its way, it stretched its arms forward to make an attack. Its golden divine fists penetrated the air, and countless illusions of golden fists appeared in the sky. Each of them shot upwards so fiercely that they seemed to be able to punch a hole in the sky. But Yi Futian didn't dodge or retreat, but continued to hurtle towards the giant's divine fists. Yi Futian's executed his flesh becoming way, so his physical body made from flesh and blood became close to a divine body instead, containing all sorts of wills in it. He was practically invincible, and one punch could break the entire starry sky. Boom, boom, boom. Their attacks collided head-on, and the collision threatened to destroy everything around it. The ear-deafening blasts of the Great Path, coming from within Yi Futian's body, rang in the air. Several cultivators tried to attack him from all sides, but none of them managed to get close. Boom! Several frightening beams of light shone through the space, and the golden divine fist was shattered. The illusion of the peacock god went right through it, and a violent attack immediately hit that level 7 Renhuang. His body went flying out into the distance, but Yi Futian did not stop there. After he had transformed into a flash of light, he started heading for the weaker Renhuangs behind him. "Stop him!" shouted one of them loudly. Several powerful Renhuangs blocked Yi Futian's body at the same time, but Yi Futian's body resounded with the sound of Buddha. Many Vajras with furious looks in their eyes went right into his opponent's heads. Then he raised his hand, and his palm became a divine monument of world suppression, which came hurtling down on them. This was an incredibly domineering move. Every person who tried to kill Yi Futian earlier was forced backward by the impact. Some were still trying to block him, so Yi Futian swung his other hand forward. An indestructible long spear instantly appeared and shattered everything it pierced. "Retreat!" All the Renhuangs behind started running far away from Yi Futian, but he suddenly clenched his fist, which immediately sealed off the space before him. Several Renhuangs were trapped in this space. After that, Yi Futian sent several leaves and branches towards them, which surrounded everyone in the space. A terrifying chilly air instantly filled the space, which brought their body temperature down to 0. They had been encased in ice. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 22:17. Fighting Everyone Himself. Chapter 22:17. Fighting everyone himself. The other cultivators looked toward Yi Futian to see vines extending from an ancient tree surround the bodies of those Renhuangs in front of him, and nobody dared to do anything rash. Even though the people under Yi Futian's control weren't from the same group as each other, nobody dared to do anything that might kill someone else. Everybody here had an extraordinary identity, and any deaths would result in a lot of trouble. Once a feud was created, nobody knew what sort of consequence would await them. The Renhuangs were sealed in ice. Everyone's eyes were on Yi Futian. That cold air he had sent out wasn't like the ordinary will of ice, but seemed more like the power of Yin instead. It was bitingly cold, and was at sub-zero temperatures. Wisps of the power of Yin had flowed out of Yi Futian, and through the vines of the tree, which then spread into the bodies of the Renhuang that were under his control, sealing all of them in ice. Even if one had a powerful will, there was no way of getting out of this. Several cultivators, who had left the earlier battle, came towards Yi Futian from all directions and surrounded him. They took a step forward, and an alarming aura and might of the Great Path weighed heavily in the air. Their gazes were icy cold as they stared at Yi Futian and said, "Let them go." Clearly, some of the cultivators sealed in ice were on their team. As I said earlier, every feud is traced back to one person, just like how every debt belongs to a creditor. None of you came here alone. So if you want to get the treasure, then go look for the person who took the treasure, said Yi Futian as he looked back at everyone else. After he finished saying that, the branches unraveled themselves and the power of Yin receded. A loud blast was heard immediately after that as the Renhuangs struggled out of their frozen state. "Otherwise I won't be so kind the next time," continued Yi Futian. The Renhuangs who struggled out of their frozen state trembled slightly all over, because the coldness had seeped into their limbs and bones, even seeping into their souls. When they were sealed in ice earlier, they felt as though their life, and even their thoughts were about to stop, as if they were truly going to become a corpse. The power of Yin was an absolute sort of iciness, so it could also freeze and seal souls. If Yi Futian let them go too late, they could suffer irreparable damage to their great path. "You're truly the only Renhuang who has been able to view Xinjia, the great emperor's divine body," sounded an authoritative voice. A powerful old man was speaking as he stared at Yi Futian. The aura he emanated was terrifying, and he was a level 8. As he stared at Yi Futian, he observed that the boy had a full head of silver hair, a brilliant glow around his body, the air of the demon god coming out from him, the illusion of the peacock demon god hanging high above him, as well as an incredible amount of divine light circulating within his body. Such a constitution could be considered invincible. It was rare to see anybody of the same level. On top of that, he could also see at least 3 different mighty powers that he had inherited. There was the power from the peacock demon god, the power of Yin, and the terrifying body of the Great Path, created from looking at Xinjia the Great Emperor. All these powers he inherited seemed to have turned him into a human-shaped monster, and he was way more terrifying than all the other perfect Great Path Renhuangs. During the short fight earlier, all of them had already noticed this. Never mind the level 6 perfect Great Path cultivators. Even those at level 7 were unable to withstand his storm-like attacks. This body of the Great Path was certainly invincible to those at the same level as him. If he launched an attack, none of them would be able to defend themselves against him. The very powerful level 7 cultivator, who fought Yi Futian, before this had been very aggressive. However, he still ended up being sent flying by Yi Futian's violent attack, before Yi Futian turned to deal with all the other people behind him. It seemed like this young man with white hair wasn't only going to become the most extraordinary person in the Shangqing continent. Still, he would probably have a place among the best and most legendary characters of the Divine Continent. I would like to know the extent of your prowess. Just then, a middle-aged level 7 Renhuang took a step forward and looked at Yi Futian as he stood above him. He didn't say that he wanted to fight because of Qinyi. Instead, he said he wanted to know Yi Futian's true fighting abilities. He wanted to know how powerful this logic-defying Renhuang that appeared from nowhere in Shangqing continent really was. I would like to know too. I want to know the prowess of a cultivator, who was the only one who managed to comprehend the divine body of Xinjia, the Great Emperor. Yet another man stepped forward. He was also a frightening level 7. Blind Tai and the rest came over to where Yi Futian was. They watched as one powerful cultivator after another stepped forward. Several powerful Renhuangs were all interested in sparring with Yi Futian. For cultivators from top factions of power, they were already the kings and leaders of the region they were from, and very few opponents could match them in power. Any high-level perfect Great Path Renhuang would be considered the cream of the crop in whichever region they were from. For example, the 4 legendary characters from Donghua Domain, Ninghua, Zhongchan, and the rest were all at this level. People like them also wanted to spar with others at their level too. Yi Futian could be considered someone invincible in his region as well, and was a powerful Renhuang who could even fight those from other regions as well. Such a character was hard to come by. He was truly a genius among geniuses, and would be someone who would make the name of the Divine Continent be heard far and wide in the near future. And so they all wanted to have a go. Of course, some thought that if they could take Yi Futian down at the same time, that would be even better. Yi Futian looked at the people around him. Every single person who had stepped forward had a terrifying aura around them. They were all cultivators at the same level as Zhongchan back then, so they could be considered people who were nearly at the top of the cultivation world. Sure, replied Yi Futian as he looked at all of them. If a level 8 does not want to fight, then the rest of you can try together. But if all of you lose the fight, then that will be the end of today's matter. All of them were speechless after hearing what Yi Futian said. He said that they could try together? A level 8 was definitely not going to try. If it was a real battle of life and death, then your level didn't really matter. But if it was merely a friendly match to spar and understand Yi Futian's true capabilities, then it wasn't ethical for someone who was 2 levels higher to participate. The difference between the 2 levels would automatically make it unfair even before fighting, and it really wouldn't be considered sparring anymore. As for a level 7, Yi Futian had already displayed incredible prowess earlier by defeating a level 7 soundly earlier. So all the level 7s wanted to give it a shot. But this young fellow was actually telling all of them to try together. Those words were a little too arrogant. In the high skies, one of them had jet black eyes and seemed to have a dark aura around him. He stared rather deeply at Yi Futian, and had gathered with the other level 7 cultivators. From his point of view, Yi Futian's value had gone way beyond the value of that treasure that Chunyi had run off with. If he could take Yi Futian down and strip him of all the inherited powers he had, that would be worth way more than one measly treasure. With that in mind, a strange glint gleamed in his eyes, and he started to get a little excited now. In that case, let them fight then. The few level 8 cultivators stepped back to move out from the fighting arena. Yi Futian took a step forward and stood in the vast starry space. In front of him, several powerful cultivators were releasing terrifying auras that weighed heavily on Yi Futian. Blind Tai and the rest were standing at a lower area and looked warily at the fighting arena. Even though the other cultivators claimed that it was just a sparring session, they still had to beware of someone suddenly making a fatal move. Human hearts were hard to predict, and these were cultivators from various factions of power, so nobody knew what each other was really thinking about. Woong! Just then, a frightening and incredible illusion appeared behind one of the Renhuangs. A glorious sun appeared, dyeing the stars red. The vast space looked like it had been covered with flames as the divine light of that endless sun, turning into several divine swords of the sun. His eyes had also transformed into the sun and shot out terrifying divine flames. With one thought, the divine sunlight shone down, and the devastating divine fire of the sun burned everything in its path to a crisp as it threatened to devour Yi Futian's body. Everyone could feel that intense heat wave in the air, and everywhere that the divine sunlight touched seemed to be on fire, as they all turned into the color of flames. The illusion of the peacock demon god behind Yi Futian gave off a gorgeous light, sending out several beams of demonic lightning, which contained the power of Yin. It clashed head-on with those divine swords of sunlight. In that instant, a frightening collision exploded in the space. Two forces had crashed into one another among the stars, and one side had been destroyed and dissipated. The countless divine swords of sunlight had actually been unable to reach Yi Futian at all. The other powerful cultivators felt their pupils constrict slightly as they stared at Yi Futian. Their bodies also exploded with the mighty might of the Great Path, and started to conjure up a terrifying attack. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2218. Practitioners of Three Major Realms. Chapter 2218. Practitioners of Three Major Realms. The practitioners from afar gazed towards the battlefield. They saw the Sun Sword Rain, Sun God Sword, and Sun Lightning display two completely different colors. They were gorgeous. At the same time, the attacks of the others arrived. Stars appeared in a person's hand. Above him a giant appeared. When he extended his large palm forward, the palm of the giant in the sky grabbed at Yi Futian's body directly, as if a giant starry palm. Stars revolved in the palm, and an immeasurable strength hid within it, a strength that could annihilate everything in its path. Yi Futian raised his head and glanced at it. He could only feel heaven and earth changing. He had entered the enemy's divine wheel of the Great Path's domain. It was like a starry dimension. In this starry dimension, the giant starry palm slammed towards him. It would annihilate everything. It was unstoppable. Boom! An endlessly overbearing aura burst from Yi Futian's body. The crackling sound of explosions covered the entire sky. It was like the roar of thunder. He raised his arm, and countless starry steel appeared everywhere. Every steel contained a frightening ancient inscription, which was the extreme attack power he learned from the Millet Emperor's Gate of World Suppression. Then at that moment a whooshing sounded. Golden spatial storms sliced through the sky as if countless thin and sharp blades had sliced the sky into pieces. They sliced towards Yi Futian's body. Multiple cultivators attacked at the same time. Wave after wave of attacks poured towards him. A chill flashed in Yi Futian's eyes as the attacks flew at him. He leaped into the sky. His not-so-stalwart body caused the sky to tremble violently, as if he was a humanoid monster. Divine lights radiated from his body. It was as if his mortal body had transformed into a starry battle form. Stars revolved. Divine lights of the Great Path of Space and the lights of the demon god also radiated from the surface of his body. The frightening golden blades had sliced through the sky and were imminent. They slashed towards his body. However, space light runes appeared. Everyone was surprised to discover that multiple doors of space had appeared around Yi Futian. They revolved around his body and formed an absolute space, devouring all the attacks coming at him. Bang! A loud bang rang in the air. Yi Futian stepped into the sky while his body shot straight towards a certain direction. It was the direction of the person who summoned the starry god of war. The starry god of war moved in the sky and extended its hand toward Yi Futian. Vang! Yi Futian's body transformed into lightning. Divine light of peacock burst from his body as they merged into one. Infusing the path of sword, he was like an indestructible sword. He flew directly across the sky. Loud rumbling noises rang in the air. His body went directly through the frightening giant starry palm. Then he charged into the star giant's body. In an instant, countless beams of frightening divine light shot out of the star giant's body. Following that, its body burst into pieces. The light did not stop after puncturing the giant. After going through it, Yi Futian continued charging towards the practitioner. The practitioner moved his body back, but the light was too quick. In an instant, it had arrived in front of him. A giant figure that looked like an ancient god appeared behind him and extended both its arms out in front to block Yi Futian's attack. Boom! Yi Futian's body reached as a sword, slamming into both his opponent's palms. Rumbling sounds rang in the air. Cracks appeared on both palms as they continued to crackle and crumble. Yi Futian directly passed through those cracks. Then he raised his hand and pointed. With a plop, the person's body was punctured and blown away. He could not withstand Yi Futian's close-range attack. However, at that moment, a frightening golden figure appeared in the sky. It slammed a monstrous divine fist at Yi Futian. Countless streams of golden light appeared and filled the starry sky. They also buried Yi Futian's body. Every fist was huge. Fists that radiated golden light filled the sky. They came from every direction. There was no way to escape. What an overbearing attack. Many people trembled as they watched. Duan Xiong recalled a super powerful faction as this scene. Yi Futian also felt a sense of familiarity. Back then, he was pursued by a ridiculously strong person with similar skills. Back then, it was also a battle in the Void Realm. It was a battle in the Shadow Realm. A powerful Renhuang of the Empty Mountain pushed him to the brink. Yi Futian stared wide-eyed as the golden divine fists flew toward him. Boom, 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 boom. Fists slammed into Yi Futian's body. His tiny body was directly buried under a flurry of fists. The practitioners watching from afar could not help but feel their hearts tremble as they gazed at the center of all the divine fists. The golden light from the divine fists radiated brightly. Waves of fist wills surged forward. An overbearing Renhuang wearing a golden outfit appeared in the sky. He looked down at Yi Futian below him. An enormous amount of the power of the Great Path continued to ooze out from his body. In the middle of the flurry of divine fists, everyone could see a tiny body in the midst. Both arms and legs were extended to withhold the gigantic divine fist. His body was also hit. However, the onlookers were shocked to discover the profound coldness in his eyes. He raised his head to look at the cultivator in the sky. He was actually fine. He's still okay even after this? People's hearts beat faster. They looked at the beautiful giant body. The golden shockwaves of its divine fists could continuously destroy a human's body and completely annihilate a person. Even if Yi Futian's body was unparalleled, even if he survived, he should have been severely injured. However, even after taking those hits, he was actually still fine. Was his body still that of a mortal's? Dong dong. It was as if everyone could hear his intense heartbeats, which made everyone's heart beat in rhythm with his. Yi Futian raised his head. An arrogance that completely disregarded everything could be seen in his gaze. The power of Yin began to emanate from his body. In an instant, the golden divine fist began to be covered under a veil of frost. At the same time, an illusion of the peacock demon god formed. A frightening divine light burst from within Yi Futian's body. In an instant, blindingly bright divine light burst forth, and those giant divine fists were completely blown to bits. Before long, they were all swept away, and nothing was left. Meanwhile, Yi Futian's figure still floated in the sky. His pitch-black pupils scanned the cultivators, as if he was an indestructible person. It was as if he could not be killed or destroyed. Under the raging winds that tore through space, the peacock demon god flapped its wings. Yi Futian directly headed towards the empty mountain practitioner in the sky. He also wanted to pay him back for earlier. The empty mountain practitioner's eyes shrunk. He took a step in the sky. Then behind him, a giant golden god of war illusion appeared. Then, he extended both his hands at the same time. Countless divine fists filled the sky, and each of the fists flew towards Yi Futian, as if they were a stream of golden fist will. The sun and sky were completely blocked out. Vong! A golden space divine wing appeared above Yi Futian. Then a frightening image appeared above the sky. It was actually a picture of a golden rock heaven slayer. It looked as if a giant ancient rock with golden wings had appeared. Yi Futian's body had transformed into the giant golden-winged rock. He flew across the sky and plowed through the flurry of golden fists, destroying them into bits and pieces all the way until he reached his opponent. The empty mountain practitioner was actually still calm, even though Yi Futian had easily arrived in front of him. The golden divine giant behind him covered his body. Its arms moved forward. Two fists flew out and broke through the sky. Nobody knew just how powerful they were. One punch could have destroyed thousands, or tens of thousands of miles of space. Roar! Then a shocking roar rang in the air. Yi Futian's body had transformed into a starry war ape. Its body was humongous, and it also swung both its fists forward. The flung fists were like two stars that had been shot forward. Rumble! A devastating sound of collision filled the air. Countless stars flew forward, and made the golden body of the enemy tremble. Whether it was the golden rock heaven slayer, or the starry war ape, they were among the 7 great divine techniques that he learned from Four Corner Village. Yi Futian had cultivated at the village for many years. He had reached a level where he could use them at any time. His understanding of the divine techniques was very profound. As the two collided together, a shadowy figure appeared above them. It was as if a dark ancient god had appeared above them. Countless gray streams of air swirled and flowed toward Yi Futian's body. In an instant, everything around him had been devoured. The gray streams of air were like dark chains that had tied him up and flowed into his body, which made Yi Futian feel the strength drain from his body. His spiritual soul was shaken. Soul chain! Yi Futian raised his head and glanced above. He saw a dark pair of eyes. This was one of the strongest practitioners of the dark world. The dark streams of air being drawn towards him were soul chains. Bang! Both his arms vibrated. He sent the empty mountain practitioner flying away. Yi Futian shifted his gaze toward the cultivator with an intense and cold stare. Soul chain. He wanted to take his spiritual soul and keep it locked up. In this battle he faced powerful practitioners from the 3 major realms, the Divine Prefecture, Empty Mountain, and the Dark World, all at the same time. Naturally, after seeing this scene, the other practitioners could not help but slightly shrink their eyes and stare at the frightening image up above. A god of ghost illusion seemed to have appeared above Yi Futian. It had a pair of dark eyes. The soul chain that originated from above the god of ghost's illusion surrounded Yi Futian, as if it wanted to extract Yi Futian's soul. On Yi Futian's body, an illusory figure of a person had already begun to appear. His spiritual soul wanted to leave the body. The person did not come for the treasure. He came for Yi Futian. Indeed, Yi Futian's value was higher than the treasure. That was why the cultivator from the dark world suddenly intervened. A battle against the practitioners of the 3 major realms. This battle was enough to help Yi Futian be famous. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2219, Attacked Instead. Chapter 2219. Attacked instead. It looked like Yi Futian was in danger. All the cultivators looked towards the battlefield. They could see Yi Futian's spiritual soul already. His physical body was at an unrivaled level. and he was practically invincible. In the battle earlier, he had proven to have fought with great ease. Even level 7 perfect Great Path cultivators were unable to break through his defenses. But when that high-level cultivator from the Dark World made an attack, he targeted Yi Futian's spiritual soul. A cultivator's spiritual soul was a lot weaker than the cultivator's body, and very few cultivated the power of their spiritual soul. So once it was attacked, that cultivator would be in deep trouble, because a spiritual soul was way more fragile than a physical body. This Dark World cultivator dared to use such a vicious method of attack at this time, probably because he had the ability to attack a spiritual soul. Otherwise, given the incredible fighting prowess that Yi Futian displayed earlier, this man probably wouldn't have dared to do anything rash. After all, right now he was trying to capture a soul. He was trying to lock down Yi Futian's spiritual soul and take it away, which was an extremely ruthless move, and was no longer within the definition of a friendly match. Once the spiritual soul left its body and was taken away, Yi Futian's physical body would become nothing but an empty shell with no soul, and others could do whatever they wanted with it. When they saw this happening, all the cultivators from Four Corner Village started moving towards where the fight was, and was ready to head upwards to attack. But at the same time, level 8 cultivators also began walking towards them and blocked their way. One of them said very loudly, "They were the ones who came up with this friendly match, so why are all of you going to interfere?" It was obvious that none of these people would be kind to Yi Futian. Once they found an opportunity, they would happily bring Yi Futian down, since that was their original intention for fighting in the first place. Now that this Dark World cultivator had made such a move, it was great news for them. That way they wouldn't offend Four Corner Village. Many of them had heard about how a mysterious man with a terrifying prowess was in Four Corner Village. "Get lost," roared Fangai angrily. A frightening divine light of space shone brilliantly, as he wanted to go right through the crowd. But those level 8 cultivators immediately unleashed a Great Path domain to separate him from the battlefield, stopping them from getting near and providing help. In an instant, a terrifying clash broke out on this side too. On the other side, back within the battlefield, the soul chains forced Yi Futian's spiritual soul to leave his body, and they were also able to eat away and hurt his soul. This made Yi Futian feel a deep chill inside him. That was a chill that came from his spiritual soul. His heart turned cold, and a murderous thought shot out through his eyes. An attack on his spiritual soul was as good as an attempt to kill him. Woong! The brilliance of divine light sparkled and covered Yi Futian's body, giving him an otherworldly glow. Yi Futian's spiritual soul seemed to have really left his physical body, and was being pulled away by those dark chains. Yi Futian's physical body stood in the space without moving. His spiritual soul seemed to have become a physical body in itself, and a frightening illusion appeared, like a celestial shadow. The eyes of the Dark World Renhuang grew icy, as even more frightening dark chains headed for that celestial shadow. But at that moment, all those chains seemed to be covered in a layer of frost, which slowly encased the chains in ice. This iciness spread at a rapid pace, moving along the dark chains and headed straight for the gigantic illusion of the dark deity in the void. Birar, that powerful deity-like body, felt a chill that seeped into his bones, and the Dark World cultivator shuddered. He felt like his own spiritual soul was cold all over, as if it had been attacked by the cold. Boom! The terrible cold continued to climb upwards, following the soul chains, and entering the illusion of the deity. After that, a terrifying heat was unleashed. Yi Futian's spiritual soul glowed brilliantly, and seemed to become the yin-yang symbol as the sun and moon intertwined. Both cold and hot were unleashed at the same time, causing both the power of yin and the power of the sun to rush into the body of the illusion of the deity. A blood-curdling scream was heard as the deity instantly suffered a terrifying attack on its spiritual soul. Countless beams of dark divine light shot out in an attempt to destroy Yi Futian's brilliantly shining spiritual soul. But Yi Futian's spiritual soul brought both the divine light of Yin and the sun further up, swallowing all the dark currents and destroying everything. It was as if he was letting the other party take hold of his soul. Since he wanted his spiritual soul, then he could have it. Boom! This time, It was the Dark World cultivator's turn to suffer. He gave a low roar as the illusion of the deity continued to get destroyed. With a loud roar, his body flew upwards and tried to get away. He got rid of the soul chains and stopped trying to take Yi Futian's spiritual soul. However, the divine light of Yin and the sun that Yi Futian's spiritual soul had unleashed caused the illusion of the deity to continue shattering into tiny pieces. The other party immediately retreated to a faraway place, screaming along the way. Even his body seemed to become a little unreal. Oh my goodness! All the other cultivators watching felt their hearts tremble at this sight. The Dark World cultivator nearly got killed instead? They watched as Yi Futian's spiritual soul floated back downwards and returned to his physical body. His body of the great path sparkled as divine light enveloped his body. He looked up to glance at the figure that had disappeared into the distance. This Dark World cultivator had tried to use his spiritual soul to attack him, but had gotten attacked instead. Even though Yi Futian hadn't managed to kill him, his spiritual soul had been very severely injured. If there was nobody powerful enough to help him, or if he couldn't get the precious spiritual soul elixir, he would take at least the next 8 to 10 years to recover from today. He looked around at the crowd and said to all the cultivators surrounding him, "Does everyone still want to continue?" Before this, several cultivators had attacked him at the same time, and everyone had been forced to retreat and were hurt. But some who hadn't made any attack earlier. However, after seeing what happened in the battle earlier, all of them already understood that level 7 perfect Great Path Renhuangs couldn't possibly defeat Yi Futian, unless you were one of those geniuses. He had defeated cultivators from the 3 major worlds without any exception. Even those Dark World cultivators' sudden attack on Yi Futian's spiritual soul had backfired, and got attacked instead. One could say that this battle had been pretty straightforward and one-sided, barely even threatening Yi Futian. That powerful cultivator from the empty divine realm had already gone all out with such a domineering attack. He had been able to shatter the divine fist in the void and slam down on Yi Futian's body. But even though he had hit Yi Futian, the impact of his hit had been broken, and he had not been able to hurt Yi Futian at all. How was anyone supposed to continue fighting such a monster? One man had been able to defeat some of the best from the 3 major worlds. If one wanted to defeat Yi Futian, they'd have to find a level 8 Renhuang to do it. In that case, then this matter comes to a close here. If you want to get that treasure back, then go and look for the one who took it. Don't implicate innocent parties, said Yi Futian before going back down to where Feng Gai and the rest were. The fight on their side also stopped. All the level 8 cultivators stared at Yi Futian, and they all looked a little unsettled. They couldn't believe that the earlier attack hadn't worked. They had purposely blocked Feng Gai and the rest from helping Yi Futian, so that the Dark World cultivator had a chance to take Yi Futian down. They didn't expect this attempt to fail. Please don't waste any more time. There are treasures in other places as well. After Yi Futian left them with those words, he turned and left. His companions also followed behind him, marching off confidently and leaving this place. This time, nobody tried to stop Yi Futian anymore. Everyone watched as Yi Futian walked off, and a look of deep thought could be seen in their eyes. I'm afraid this man will become a truly great character in the Divine Continent. Someone finally spoke up. All of them were the cream of the crop among their peers, but it had been a very long time since they saw a Renhuang as extraordinary as Yi Futian. He was only at level 6 now, but in the future, he would probably become a super powerful character. Of course, that was assuming he didn't die before that. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. After Yi Futian and his companions left, they continued to head further up the starry skies. He didn't bother himself with Chen Yi. He had experienced that fellow's speed for himself after all. Back then, Ninghua already had trouble catching up with him. Furthermore, his cultivation level had increased, and his way of light was certainly much stronger, and his speed would be much faster. He was probably the fastest person in the world when it came to running for his life. After Yi Futian and his companions left, they continued to head further up the starry skies. He didn't bother himself with Qin Yi. He had experienced that fellow's speed for himself after all. Back then, Ninghua already had trouble catching up with him. Furthermore, his cultivation level had increased, and his way of light was certainly much stronger, and his speed would be much faster. He was probably the fastest person in the world when it came to running for his life. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to snatch that treasure under the noses of so many powerful cultivators. There were several nebulas in different parts of the starry skies. Fights had broken out in many places, and it was a terrifying sight to behold. Thankfully, they weren't on land but in space, so these fights would not bring harm to innocent parties, and everyone could fight to their heart's content here. Yi Futian didn't know how many treasures here had been placed by cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace, but it was clear that certain areas had been left behind from Ziwei the Great's cultivation. For example, the nebula that Yi Wuqian had swallowed earlier was probably the sword will left behind by Ziwei the Great, which turned into a sword-shaped nebula. Besides that place, there were many other parts, which were extremely difficult to comprehend. Many high-level cultivators were still trying their best to comprehend and uncover all the secrets within, but they had not been successful so far. Where are we going? Feng Gai stood beside Yi Futian and asked him. Yi Futian's eyes looked towards the highest point in the sky, where the illusion of a great emperor stood in the starry sky with a heavenly scroll in hand. That was probably where most high-level cultivators had congregated, and they would probably be the best from various worlds. All of them wanted to uncover this ultimate secret and find out what was the greatest inheritance that Ziwei the Great had left behind. Also, what was in that heavenly scroll? This was also something that piqued Yi Futian's interest the most. But of course, if Ziwei the Great had really hidden an inheritance here, then it would certainly not be easy to obtain it. Ziwei the Great was a great emperor of ancient days, and this place must have existed for many, many years now. Ziwei Imperial Palace was in control of everything here, but the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace still had not gained enlightenment of these secrets till today. So this was definitely a complicated process. Ziwei the Great was a ruler of the Ziwei segmentum. This segmentum worshipped Ziwei the Great, and top cultivators cultivated like him. This place was filled with some of the world's greatest geniuses, and if even these people had been unable to comprehend anything, the chances of them comprehending anything were slim. But of course it wasn't all hopeless. This time, several things that the great emperor had left behind had been inherited. After all, some of the most legendary characters from all over the world had come this time. Many of them were extremely gifted, so their overall abilities were greater than the cultivators in the Ziwei segmentum. Yi Futian stopped walking and stood in the vast starry sky. The stars above shone on him, as he turned back to look at the vast starry world. "What's wrong?" Gu Donglu asked him quietly. "Nothing. I was casually looking around to see if I could see anything different," replied Yi Futian. "I want to go up there and have a look. Do you want to come with me or go elsewhere? There are many other places around here where you can gain enlightenment. We'll go to other places and not waste any time there." "But 2 people ought to go along with you," said Gu Donglu. Even though he possessed an extraordinary inheritance himself, he had some degree of self-awareness too. If any of them were going to stand out among the rest of the cultivators here, only Yi Futian fit the bill. It was impossible for the rest of them. He wasn't looking down on himself. This was just a sincere understanding of himself. There were way too many legendary characters here. After being sent by Princess Donghuang to the Divine Continent to cultivate all these years, he also saw some super powerful legends and confirmed that their difference in level was significant. If he said that he was confident of winning the cultivators in these starry skies, that would definitely be a sign of audacity. It was better to go elsewhere to have a look and try his luck to see if he could be enlightened. "I'll go with him," avowed Blind Tai. He couldn't see and never thought about inheriting anything else. He was happy to cultivate his divine hammer of the protector to the best he could. Having one powerful move was better than having 1,000 low-level moves. Cultivating one aspect to its maximum was better than having to learn 1,000 different cultivation techniques. The divine hammer of the protector had also been left behind by a great character from history, the Four-Corner Great Emperor. He was a pioneer of Four-Corner Village. As for why he wanted to protect Yi Futian, it probably came out from a hope he had in Yi Futian. Yi Futian had completely rewritten Four-Corner Village's destiny, and they all knew that if they wanted to continue to rewrite Four-Corner Village's destiny, the most important person was Yi Futian. He was considered one of the villagers, but all his disciples were the future of the village, including his own son. And so, after they left Four-Corner Village, Blind Tai had always been taking up the role of protecting Yi Futian. Fang Gai also did the same. "I'll stay with him too. The rest of you can go and have a look elsewhere," Fang Gai spoke up. He didn't have strong ambitions either, since the next 2 generations after him were even more outstanding. He and Fang Huan had been rescued from the ancient royal family of Duan by Yi Futian, and Fang Xiyuan was now a disciple of Yi Futian. So Yi Futian was a huge benefactor to his family, and everything he did now was not only for the sake of the Fang family's future, but also a bid to repay Yi Futian for his kindness. Also, Fang Gai himself was a brilliant man, who could tell that Yi Futian was the right choice. That was why he went along with Old Ma to chase the entire Muyan family out of the village. Everything that happened later showed that he had certainly made the right choice. Now, even the Nanhai family could not surpass the extraordinary position that Four-Corner Village had within the Shangqing continent. The village would only become more and more powerful, so Muyan Long was bound to regret staying with the Nanhai family in the future. Sure. All of them nodded slightly, with 2 level 8 cultivators protecting Yi Futian and Yi Futian's own prowess. As long as they didn't run into anybody too powerful, they should do just fine. Actually, Yi Futian by himself was already enough, but his position was way too important to the rest, so they placed his safety as their priority. On top of that, Yi Futian often attracted powerful attacks on himself. Now that he wanted to comprehend Ziwei the Great's inheritance, he could run into the most powerful character in this universe. The group split ways. Yi Futian, Blind Tai, and Fang Gai continued heading upwards, while the rest left for other parts of the starry sky. As they headed upwards, Yi Futian could feel a divine aura that felt like true might hit him. It was as if one of the great emperors of the past was still around. It was as if the will of Ziwei the Great was still here, and that's why this might existed. At this moment, Yi Futian and his companions couldn't help but feel a sense of solemnity rise from their hearts. As they moved upwards and looked up at the illusion of that divine face above them, they felt like this god was looking back at them. They were in front of a god, so they ought to bow down and worship. Besides them, many other cultivators were already in that same space. Also, these were all legendary geniuses from all over the world. Only such people would come here directly. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.